Hello and welcome to another Sonic Lab. Today we're looking at the 10th Roland boutique in the range. That's right, it's the Roland SH-O1A, which is the analog circuit behavior modelled sort of recreation, reinvention, regurgitation, however you want to say it, of the classic SH-101. Now this little synth came out in the 80s and it was a bit of a revelation for a lot of people. Not only was it tiny, but you had a little modulation grip, you could kind of wear it, but it was very affordable, which meant that it was a gateway for many people who were starting out in electro-pop to kind of do electronic music and use it. And as such, it's kind of quite a formative synthesizer because it's the sound for many people of the bands that they really dig. Not only that, I mean, it's continued to be very popular over the years because it's just got a certain something. In many ways, it's kind of a classic Roland sound. Now, this is the boutique version, as we've said, same form factor as the other 9 boutiques, but somehow there's something about this form factor that really kind of works, even though the faders are again really tiny, and it just feels like the layout is much more kind of friendly to this particular size format. I know I've said in the past with some of the boutiques that I found them really irritating and fiddly because there's just too much going on the panel. With this one, I think they got it just about right. It feels like a perfect thing because it's not trying to do too much. So this is analog circuit behavior, analog model, so it's all DSP in size. It runs as an internal sample frequency of 44.1. We've got a USB output, which gives us both audio and MIDI, and that's also how you power the unit. You can just plug that into a regular power supply, but it's also got, like many of the other boutiques, little battery compartment, 4 AA's, and a tiny little speaker inside it if you fancy using it in that way. And the thing about the SH-101, and now of course the SH-O1A, is that it's just very easy and very accessible. There was an SH-101 model for the IRA System 1, which I remember I think I reviewed, and I had an SH-101 and they sounded pretty close, so we can assume the DSP code is pretty much on there. In fact, it's quite possible that they may well have tweaked it a little bit, because to my ears this does sound pretty good. So let's just get straight to it and see what it sounds like. As with the original SH-101, got a little mixer section, and of course we have to start with the classic sawtooth wave. I've got just a little arpeggiator running in here. There is a sequencer in it, but we'll do it for here for now. In the SH-O1A, they've changed the range. They've added 32 and 64 feet, but it goes right up to 2 feet as well. There's a little bit of aliasing right at the top, but that ain't bad. And if we just come to the scope, waveform's a decent shape. I can show you that on the screen. And we got a nice thump down there for the low end. And it does sound really familiar. I mean, it feels very authentic, you know, that classic Roland sawtooth sound. You know, it's a thing, and that thing is present in the SH-O1A. So just bring that down. We've also got a square wave. Again, a little bit of aliasing up there, but let's just check again on the scope here. Really good healthy thump down there at 30 Hertz and below, depending on what pitch you're at. And of course we've got the ability to modulate the pulse width and change the pulse width. We've got manual mode. And again, it's a very familiar sound, isn't it? It's got that kind of thing that I think the SH-101 is very famous for. Finally, we've got a sub-oscillator, which is on its own fader. And that goes from 1 octave down. Again, we look on the scope. It's got a nice low sub content. And then we can go down 2 octaves. So bring another wave in, 1 octave, 2 octaves, and then we've also got 2 octaves at what sounds like maybe 25% PWM. Finally, we've got the noise. It's actually quite dull, but what's cool about this is because it's all DSP, they've done a few tweaks, and one of the tweaks is we can press the menu button, go into System, And then we've got noise type, so we can actually have the original noise or a variation of the noise, which just sounds a bit more kind of full range and high frequency if you want to use that, say, for hi-hat or, you know, some other noise-based thing. So with the mixer and pulse width, we can get some really big tones coming in here. Start bringing the filter in and the envelope. Get some really nice stuff. A couple other things, we've also got portamento, obviously, but there's another really cool trick up its sleeve, and that is if we go to the assign menu, hit go, we've got mono mode, we've also got unison. Now, what the heck does unison mean? Well, the little secret, probably not such a big secret if you're interested in this, you've probably found this out already, is we can get up to 4 voices of SH-O1A, and that is assignable. It can be straight mono mode or unison mode, which really does, if I flip between them quickly, that stacks up basically 4 sets of voices into one. There's no tweaking of the D tune or anything. I mean, it's just a straight thing. But there's another mode as well, which is also pretty cool. Obviously, poly mode. So we can actually play polyphonic pads and such like. And that is a really interesting change. I mean, obviously not all monosynths work as polysynths, but this kind of works. I mean, obviously the filter, it can get a bit thick, but it's really nice to have that ability. And but it does raise an interesting point, because ultimately, you know, most synths sound good with effects. And in fact, the boutique range, quite a lot of them have simple delay or reverb or other effects in them. Unfortunately, with the SH-O1A, there is none, and it would have been great just to maybe have a delay effect in there. You know, I realise it would probably change the aesthetic of it if you actually put controls on the front panel, and if not, maybe you'd have to get into menu. But in my opinion, an effect would have really brought the synth to life even more. Obviously, we're playing with the filter. I should probably talk about the filter a little bit. If we go back into mono mode and just come back to our regular test, which is just as usual, sawtooth. Let's take the modulation out of it, take it down an octave. It's got that lovely that sort of Roland filter burn. Again, it's a really familiar sound, and it feels like, to me, they've really nailed that pretty well, and it feels like, again, a very familiar thing. So try that with a bit of resonance, half resonance, 25%, full resonance, and yeah, if we bring the keyboard. Yeah, we can play the keyboard and do all of those things. Again, familiar to those of you who've got an SH-O1A or have played one. Very nice. So another area where they've enhanced the O1A over the 101 is in the LFO. We get 2 additional waveforms. We've got ramp up and ramp down. And basically we can use the LFO to modulate pitch or the VCF frequency. In this case, got a little sequencer running. But there's an additional feature, and that is the LFO advanced mode. Hit menu, go into into system, then go to LFO, and then we can go into advanced mode. And what that allows us to do is to go into a higher speed, a higher rate LFO. So, for instance, if I play this little sequence, and now I take the rate up, we can get into some sort of slightly more modern audio rate modulation stuff, and that's quite nice. It really works well with that SH-101 sort of basic sound. While on the subject of enhancements, obviously we've also got memories in here. We hit those and we get into the tone memories, and we've got 8 banks of 8, and they can just be stored and recalled in these buttons. It's actually quite easily accessible. Of course, another major part of the 101 was the sequencer, and we also have a sequencer here, but again, it's being enhanced. We've got memory storage and other things. Let's just take a look at that now. So to access the sequencer patterns, press the menu button, option 2, then we've got 8 banks of 8. Now, unfortunately, those patches aren't linked to the actual internal patches, so you can't change patches and then find you've got the sequence that you want for that particular one. They're addressed separately, which is a little bit of a shame. Be nice to link those up, obviously. So the sequencer has the same 100 steps as the original SH-O1A, that's per pattern. There's no way of recording parameters on each step, which I thought might be something nice for the boutique update, but you can play up to 4 notes per step, because obviously we've got a polyphonic instrument here. So entering into the step record mode is simple. We press load, that's step 1, then I'm going to press a note, rest, 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 then legato. So now, if there's any luck, I can press play. I'm in auto portamento, so in the legato it's portamento. Now the eagle-eyed may have spotted, although it's a pretty indistinguishable, I must admit. I was trying to go for that kind of left field bass line, which I think was a square wave on the 101, or it sounded like it, but obviously I can't get that sort of level of detail. And you know, it is as simple as it is on the 101, but again, it's also as limited. Sequencer could be clocked either via internal clock or external clock. In fact, we could get the MIDI over USB or via the MIDI in. There's also an arpeggiator, which is again very, very simple affair. So I've got this sound here, which you may notice actually demonstrates yet another feature of the SH-O1A, and that is the fact that we can set up kind of chord stacks using the 4 voices. You do this, you go into the assign menu and you switch, you've got your mono, unison, poly, and then there's a chord mode, and then each of these notes represents an on or off button for that chord, and if you press and hold you can see the tuning of each of those individual notes. So in this instance I've got that going on. Also you might notice, yeah, there is some velocity going on here, though it only affects the amplitude. You can't route that to the filter or anything for those kind of nice twangy kind of classic Roland filter things, but at least you have got, and you can set it to be full velocity on as a standard mono synth, half velocity, and there are a bunch of different curves if you set it to be on, as in, you know, translating velocity into VCA amplification for each of the individual voices. Right, so getting back to the arpeggiator, it's really simple. We've got up, and down, and up. There's only 3 modes. So I'll press that in, play a couple of notes, you can hold those, and you also notice that in this instance, I've got the LFO driving the sync of the arpeggiator. I can use the LFO to sync the arpeggiator and also the sequencer, so you can have kind of tempo sync modulation effects, which is kind of cool. A couple of other features, we've got the ability to, if I now get this again, I press and hold down and up together, I can increase the range to 2 octaves, which is more than the original SH-O1A. It's also possible, although it won't demonstrate because I've got the LFO sync, we can change the scaling. So we can go 4, 8, 16, 32, 4th triplets, 8th triplet and 16 triplets. So that's the feel of the arpeggiator. It's also worth mentioning that we've got an external clock in, so we could advance steps on both the sequencer or the arpeggiator by sending clock in here. That could be your standard sort of 16th pulses, or you could just do it based on whatever you send. You could trigger those manually and just jump between notes if you want to do it that way. Additional connectors are CV and gate out. This is a standard volt per octave, and the gate is standard out. You've got a little bit of tweaking and scaling of this in the menu parameters, but it is a fairly standard kind of format, so it's very useful for other stuff. I've also got a master tune here, which is quite useful because it's got quite a wide range, plus or minus a fifth, it sounds like. It really, like I say, makes sense of the boutique form factor for this particular synth. I mean, there are other factors that we need to, we've got obviously the ribbon strips. Ribbon strips can be set so that we've got, right here, we've got the ability to assign the bender to mod or VCF and the LFO to mod depth. These are tiny little faders, actually. They're very, very teeny tiny. And there's also a way to create a pitch bend that goes up a scale. So it's kind of a scaled glissando type affair. All, again, really nice. Transpose on the front button. And for those of you who are automation nuts, yes, you can do CC control of all of these parameters. It's really straightforward, no NRPN stuff. And also you can set it to dump its memory contents via a packet of CC controllers. So you can effectively dump a memory contents in a little CC burst that will set up the instrument again into the way, you know, the sound that you currently have. So that's kind of a nice little feature as well. So overall, I really actually like the sound of this. I mean, it's very evocative and, you know, pretty much a dead ringer for the original SH-O1A, and I think the form factor for this boutique works really well. It's 349 UK pounds, other currencies will display below, which actually is in line with the current boutiques, but when you look back to say the JU06, that kind of era, it is a little bit more expensive, and if they could have dropped the price a little bit, it would have made a much easier decision to make, I think. USB, you get audio in and out, just 2 channels, which obviously you can record directly in via missing out any A to D conversion externally again. But overall, like I say, it's got that really familiar sound of the SH-O1A, and they've done a really good job of modelling it. So overall, quite impressed with this, more than I thought it would be, and I can understand, it sort of reinforces why the SH-O1A is such a sort of classic little synthesizer. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.